Hello and welcome, story enthusiasts, to Story-Driven English. I'm so thrilled to have you join me here on this journey, where we explore complex topics through the power of narrative and personal perspective. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, and let's be honest, often perplexing relationship. The dynamic between former US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, before we begin, I want to be crystal clear. What you're about to hear are my personal reflections and interpretations. This isn't meant to be a definitive journalistic account, nor is it intended to criticize or attack any individual or organization. My aim is simply to offer a unique lens, a story-driven perspective, on a relationship that has undeniably shaped global events. We'll be looking at their interactions, their public statements, and the broader context of international politics to try and understand the nuances of their connection. Was it purely transactional? Was it a clash of personalities? Or was there something deeper at play? Think of this as a thoughtful conversation, a narrative exploration, where we can all learn and perhaps gain a new appreciation for the complexities of international relations. So, grab a comfortable seat, open your mind, and let's delve into the story of Trump and Zelensky, here on Story-Driven English. Let's get started. Title: Zelensky Meets Trump, a diplomatic comedy, a gripping duel, ORA tragedy unfolding. The wind whistled through the skyscrapers of Washington, D.C., carrying the chill of September. Outside the White House, the maple trees had begun to turn color, heralding the arrival of another autumn. But inside, the atmosphere was hotter than ever. The beast, Cadillac One, the symbol of American power, had just disappeared behind the iron gates, leaving a faint trail of exhaust fumes in its wake. President Donald Trump had returned to his sanctuary, preparing for a meeting that the whole world held its breath for. Meanwhile, in a hotel not far from the White House, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stood by the window, looking down at the city. His face was pensive, his gaze distant. His olive-green military uniform, familiar from the battlefields of Donbass, now appeared in the heart of the American capital, creating a poignant contrast. Zelensky understood that the fate of his country, the lives of millions of Ukrainians, might be decided in the hours to come. "This is more than just an ordinary diplomatic meeting," Zelensky murmured to himself, his voice hoarse. "This is a life-or-death battle. We must win, at any cost." Zelensky's mission in coming to America, ostensibly to meet with President Trump, but more deeply, to win over America, to secure the support and aid needed to confront the ongoing war in eastern Ukraine. But would the path to the heart of America be so easy? Would Zelensky be able to persuade a capricious leader like Donald Trump, a man who always placed national interests above all else? Questions and doubts swirled in Zelensky's mind, like dark clouds gathering to obscure the Washington sky. He knew that the upcoming meeting could be a diplomatic comedy, a tense duel, or even a tragedy for Ukraine. Chapter 1. The tears and laughter context of the meeting. Burden of history. Harsh reality. To deeply understand this historic encounter, we need to step back and look at the big picture, placing the event in the flow of history and a complex geopolitical context. Ukraine, a nation with a history of pain and loss, was struggling to cope with overwhelming challenges. From the horrific Holodomor famine in the past to the ongoing conflicts in the present, Ukraine seemed never to have fully enjoyed peace and prosperity. The 2014 Maidan revolution shook Ukraine, toppling the pro-Russian government and opening a new chapter in the nation's history. But simultaneously, it ignited the conflict in the east, when Russia annexed Crimea and supported separatist forces in Donbass. Since then, Ukraine had spiraled into war, economic decline, social division, and millions of people were forced to flee their homes. We are paying the price for our choices, a Ukrainian political analyst said bitterly. We chose the path towards the West, and that angered Russia. Now, we have to bear the consequences ourselves. Against this backdrop, Zelensky, a comedian with no political experience, unexpectedly won the Ukrainian presidential election in 2019, promising to bring peace and stability to the country. But Zelensky quickly realized that this task was much harder than he imagined. He had to face a protracted war in the East, a weakened economy, and a political system riddled with corruption. Above all, he had to seek support from external powers, especially the United States, to deal with Russia. Ukraine is against the wall. A Zelensky advisor admitted, "We need America's help. But we can't buy that help at any cost. We must uphold national sovereignty and dignity." Meanwhile, the United States under President Donald Trump had a completely different foreign policy from previous administrations. With the slogan, "America First," Trump always put national interests first and was skeptical about America's role in international affairs. He did not believe in traditional alliances, did not want to shoulder the responsibility of global security, and always sought to bargain with allies to get maximum benefits. Why should we pour money into Ukraine? Trump had publicly questioned, are they a NATO member? What do they contribute to us? Where's Europe? Why don't they solve their own problems? Trump's blunt statements had raised deep concerns in Cuba. Zelensky understood that to gain American support, he needed not only to appeal to reason but also to stir the emotions of this unpredictable president. Chapter 2. Winning over whom? No simple matter. Diplomatic gamble. Arduous path. When Zelensky set foot on American soil, he carried a heavy mission, to win over America to save Ukraine. But winning over whom was the right and most effective approach? Winning over President Trump personally, or winning over the entire American political and social system at large? This was a thorny question with no easy answer. 2.1. Winning over Trump. A risky gamble. All-in bet, or diplomatic suicide. President Trump is a man of emotions, a veteran U.S. diplomat observed before the summit. He likes praise, admiration, and things that are unique and different. Zelensky understood this clearly. He had thoroughly studied Trump, from his leadership style to his personal preferences. He knew that Trump liked humor, impressive performances, and strong, decisive words. Maybe I should tell him a few Ukrainian jokes, Zelensky thought to himself as he entered the Oval Office. Or maybe I should give him a traditional Vyshyvanka embroidered shirt. He would definitely appreciate this uniqueness. However, Zelensky was also aware that flattering Trump was a double-edged sword. Trump could easily sense insincerity and even react negatively if he felt bribed. Moreover, focusing too much on pleasing Trump could make Zelensky lose points in the eyes of Congress and the American people. We can't rely on just one person, a Ukrainian diplomat warned. We need broad support from both houses of Congress, from the media, and from the American public. If we focus only on Trump, we might isolate ourselves. 2.2. Winning over America. The arduous path. Climbing a mountain in the dark. Seeking light. The option of winning over America seemed safer and more sustainable, but it was also an arduous path, requiring patience and ingenuity. America was not just Trump. Behind the unpredictable president was a complex political system, with Congress, political parties, interest groups, and public opinion. Zelensky knew that to win over America, he needed to approach many different channels. He needed to lobby Congress, persuading lawmakers of the importance of supporting Ukraine. He needed to appeal to the American people through speeches, television interviews, and community activities. He also needed to enlist the support of international organizations, such as the United Nations, NATO, and the European Union. This is a marathon, not a sprint, a US-Ukraine relations expert noted. Zelensky needs to build a broad coalition supporting Ukraine in America, and this takes time and effort. But did Zelensky have enough patience and skill to reach the destination? On this arduous path, could he overcome political barriers, differing viewpoints, and conflicting interests to persuade America to stand with Ukraine? Chapter 3: Zelensky, comedian or strategist? A fragile line, the art of improvisation. As the doors of the Oval Office opened, Zelensky walked in with a bright smile, shaking President Trump's hand warmly. Observers immediately focused on every gesture and word of the two leaders, trying to decipher the real meaning behind this diplomatic display. 3.1 Zelensky, the comedian, a risky gambit, walking a tightrope, or falling into the abyss. I am very glad to meet you, Mr. President. Zelensky began in fluent English. I was a comedian before becoming president. I hope our meeting will not become a tragedy. Trump laughed, patting Zelensky on the shoulder. I like your humor. But don't forget, politics is not a comedy stage. This is the real world, where every decision has its price. The initial banter seemed to ease the tense atmosphere, but some analysts argued that Zelensky was reprising his old role, trying to use humor to win over Trump. Zelensky is playing a risky game, a body language expert observed. He's trying to create the impression of a friendly, approachable leader, but this could be seen by Trump as weakness, a lack of seriousness. Throughout the meeting, Zelensky constantly used jokes, metaphors, and humorous comparisons to illustrate serious issues. He even likened the situation in Ukraine to a black comedy, where the protagonist constantly encounters laugh or cry situations. However, some opinions suggested that Zelensky had gone too far, crossing the line of diplomatic tact. Some American newspapers criticized Zelensky for making tactless or even crude remarks that made Trump and US officials uncomfortable. Mr. Zelensky needs to remember that he is talking to the President of the United States, not to an audience in a comedy show. A political commentator wrote, "Humor can be a useful tool, but it can also backfire if overused." 3.2 Zelensky, the strategist, pressure tactic, a double-edged sword. Alongside criticisms, there were also those who argued that Zelensky was actually dueling with Trump, trying to use shock tactics to exert pressure and obtain favorable terms for Ukraine. Zelensky is not as naive as many people think. A military analyst noted, he is an intelligent, sharp person with a clear strategy. He knows that to get Trump's attention, he needs to do something different, make a strong impression. Zelensky's shock tactic could be seen in several aspects. Firstly, his choice to wear military uniform throughout his US visit was a powerful message, showing that Ukraine was at war and needed urgent assistance. Secondly, Zelensky may have deliberately used crude, tactless remarks to test Trump's reaction, to see if the US president was willing to engage in frank and decisive dialogue. Zelensky might be using a provocation tactic to force Trump to make quick decisions. A political psychology expert analyzed, he might be trying to create a false emergency situation, to make Trump feel compelled to act immediately. However, This double-edged sword strategy also carried many risks. Trump, known for his hot-tempered and unpredictable nature, could get angry and react negatively if he felt forced or offended. If this happened, the risk of the US cutting aid to Ukraine was entirely possible. Chapter 4. When European giants stand aside. Inexplicable indifference. Unexpected move. While the Zelensky-Trump meeting unfolded tensely and uncertainly, the European giants remained notably silent. The European Union (EU), considered one of Ukraine's most important partners, was criticized for being indecisive, lacking concrete actions to support Kyiv. 4.1. Europe turning a blind eye, indecisiveness, or deep calculations. I'm truly disappointed by Europe's indifference. A high-ranking Ukrainian official shared with a sad expression, "We are on the front lines, protecting Europe's borders." But they stand aside, observing, coldly. The EU's silence could be explained by various reasons. Some opinions suggested that Europe was waiting to see America's reaction before making its own decisions. They wanted to see if Trump was genuinely willing to support Ukraine before committing their own resources. Europe is playing a wait-and-see game, a European economic analyst noted. They want to see who will pay first, and then decide whether to participate or not. Others argued that the EU was preoccupied with internal issues, such as the economic crisis, Brexit, and the rise of populism. They lacked sufficient resources or political will to intervene strongly in the Ukraine issue. Europe is distracted by too many problems, a European diplomat admitted. We are facing major challenges on many fronts, and Ukraine is not our top priority. Whatever the reason, Europe's inaction made Ukraine feel abandoned and disappointed. Zelensky understood that Ukraine could not rely solely on US assistance, but needed strong support from the entire West, including Europe. 4.2. Britain playing the maverick. Bold move, or hidden motives. While the EU remained silent, Britain made a different move. The British Prime Minister, in a surprise announcement, pledged to provide a large loan to Ukraine, but with a bitter pill condition. The money could only be used to buy British-made weapons. "We will help Ukraine strengthen its defense capabilities," the British Prime Minister declared. "But we also have to protect the interests of the British defense industry." Britain's maverick move caused much controversy. Some opinions suggested that Britain was seizing the opportunity to profit from the war in Ukraine, exploiting Kiev's difficult situation to boost arms exports. Britain is acting like an opportunist, an international economic analyst criticized. They are exploiting Ukraine's tragedy to enrich themselves. However, others argued that this was a high-handed move by Britain to strengthen its influence on the international stage, especially after Brexit. Britain wanted to prove that, despite leaving the EU, it remained a major power with an important role in global affairs. Britain is playing a big game, a geopolitical expert noted. They want to reaffirm their position on the world map, and Ukraine is an ideal stepping stone. Whatever the true motive, Britain's move offered some solace to Ukraine, amidst the EU's indifference and uncertainty from the US. Chapter 5. Inapt comparisons between Ukraine and South Vietnam. A history lesson. Haunting regret. In analyzing the situation in Ukraine, some observers drew comparisons with South Vietnam, Republic of Vietnam, RVN, in the past, a country that also faced great power intervention and the risk of being abandoned by its allies. 5.1. Eerily similar. A warning from history. The plight of Ukraine today reminds me of South Vietnam in the 1970s. A veteran historian shared, "Both countries have eerie similarities, that make one fear history will repeat itself. The parallels between Ukraine and RVN could be seen in many aspects. Both were small nations with strategically important locations, situated at geopolitical flashpoints. Both had to face the risk of invasion from larger neighboring countries, Russia and China, and both needed external support to survive and develop. Both Ukraine and RVN relied on the patronage of Western powers, the historian continued, but history has proven that this patronage is not always reliable. Great powers always prioritize their own interests, and can abandon allies when the situation becomes difficult. The lesson of the US abandonment of RVN still haunted many observers, raising concerns about Ukraine's fate. Would history repeat itself? Would Ukraine become a second RVN, abandoned by its allies when the war became too costly and complex? 5.2 Worlds apart, a solid foundation, hope for survival. However, despite the eerily similar points, there were also major differences between Ukraine and RVN. These differences could bring hope and opportunity to Ukraine, helping the nation avoid the tragic fate of RVN. There are major differences between Ukraine and RVN, a geopolitical expert analyzed. Ukraine has a much more strategically important geopolitical position than RVN. Ukraine is a large country, strategically located in the heart of Europe, and is a barrier against Russia's expansion to the west. Furthermore, Ukraine also received stronger international support than RVN in the past. The EU and NATO had spoken out condemning Russia's actions and pledged to support Ukraine economically, politically, and militarily. International public opinion also sided with Ukraine, condemning Russia's aggression and calling on the international community to act to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Ukraine is not as alone as RVN was, the geopolitical expert concluded. Ukraine has many powerful allies, and has many opportunities to overcome difficulties and protect its future. More importantly, Ukraine had a stronger internal strength than RVN. The Ukrainian people had shown remarkable unity, fighting spirit, and patriotism. They had stood up to defend their country, resisting Russian aggression, and determined to build a better future. The Ukrainian people have shown they are not easily subdued, the expert said. They have a fierce will to live, a burning desire for freedom, and an undying belief in the future. This is Ukraine's greatest strength, and something RVN lacked. Chapter 6. Media and Public Opinion, Double-Edged Sword, Invisible Power, Hidden Dangers throughout the Zelensky-Trump meeting. Media and public opinion played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the event. Newspapers, television channels, and social media platforms simultaneously reported, commented on, and analyzed the meeting, creating a multidimensional, sometimes contradictory chorus. 6.1. Left-wing and right-wing press. Different lenses distorted truth. You can guess the newspaper's viewpoint just by reading the headline about the Zelensky-Trump meeting. A media researcher noted, left-wing and right-wing media have completely different lenses when viewing this event. Left-wing newspapers, such as the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN, tended to criticize Trump and defend Ukraine. They focused on Trump's controversial actions and statements and emphasized the need to support Ukraine to resist Russian aggression. Trump treated Zelensky disrespectfully, an editorial in the New York Times wrote. He put personal interests above national interests and abandoned an ally in trouble. Conversely, right-wing newspapers, such as the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, and Breitbart News, took a more critical view of Zelensky. They focused on Ukraine's weaknesses, such as corruption, lack of reform, and dependence on foreign aid. They also supported Trump's America First policy and argued that the US should not intervene too deeply in the Ukraine issue. Ukraine needs to solve its own problems, a commentary in the Wall Street Journal wrote. America is not the world's midwife. We need to focus on our own interests. The deep division in media coverage and commentary reflected the deep division in American public opinion on the Ukraine issue. 6.2 Pro-Trump and anti-Trump public opinion. Battle on social media. The battle between pro-Trump and anti-Trump factions was even fiercer. The hashtag ZELENSKY Trump meeting became a virtual battlefield where opposing views clashed violently. Pro-Trump people praised Trump as a wise, pragmatic, and strong leader. They argued that Trump had acted properly to protect American interests, and Zelensky had no right to lecture Trump. Trump is number one. He doesn't let anyone take advantage of America. A Twitter user wrote. Conversely, anti-Trump people criticized Trump as insensitive, abandoning Ukraine, and only wanting to exploit the situation for profit. They expressed support for Zelensky in Ukraine and called for the US to increase aid to Kyiv. Trump is a disgrace to America. He betrayed Ukraine and democratic values. We must stand with Ukraine. A Facebook user raged. Public opinion about Zelensky was also diverse. Some saw him as a hero, a brave, resilient leader, daring to confront power. Others saw him as lacking diplomacy, overconfident, and unfamiliar with US foreign policy. The deep polarization of public opinion created a tense and divisive atmosphere, further complicating the situation surrounding the Zelensky-Trump meeting. Chapter 7. Behind the scenes of the meeting. Little-known details. Zelensky's showmanship. Trump's tactics. Beyond the information published in the media. There were also interesting behind-the-scenes details about the meeting, revealing parts of the personalities and strategies of the two leaders. 7.1 Zelensky's showmanship. Message from a Tyrion of the most noticed behind-the-scenes details was President Zelensky's attire. Throughout his U.S. visit, Zelensky consistently appeared in an olive-green military uniform, a departure from traditional diplomatic protocol. Zelensky's wearing of military uniform is a clear message, a protocol expert noted. He wants to show the world that Ukraine is at war, and he is a commander-in-chief, leading the country in this war. Some sources suggested that Zelensky deliberately chose impressive attire to attract media and public attention, creating a strong and memorable image. There were even reports that Zelensky had ignored traditional diplomatic protocols, such as not wearing a tie, to express dissatisfaction with Trump, or to create a unique, different leadership style. Zelensky is trying to market Ukraine, a political analyst noted. He is using every tool possible, including attire, to impress and garner support. However, Zelensky's showmanship actions were also criticized as disrespectful, inappropriate for a high-level meeting. Some critics argued that Zelensky should focus on the content of the negotiations, rather than acting out to attract attention. 7.2 Trump's tactics, the art of pressure, treacherous psychological maneuvers. On the other side, President Trump was also accused of playing tricks, deliberately creating awkward situations to put pressure on Zelensky. Some sources revealed that Trump had ignored important issues, such as military and economic aid to Ukraine, and focused on minor details, such as demanding Zelensky investigate Joe Biden's son. Trump is using a big fish eats small fish tactic. An anonymous diplomat revealed. He's trying to make Zelensky feel weak, dependent on the US, to ISIL force Ukraine to concede. Trump was reportedly intentionally interrupting Zelensky multiple times during joint press conferences, not allowing the Ukrainian president to fully present his views. He was also reported to have used strong, threatening, and disparaging language in private negotiations, making Zelensky feel uncomfortable and uneasy. Trump is playing a psychological game, an international negotiation expert analyzed. He wants to control the game and make the opponent feel pressured to easily achieve his goals. Trump's tactics, although criticized as unprofessional, selfish, and only wanting to win in every game, also showed the ruthlessness, coldness, and decisiveness of an America First leader, willing to do anything to achieve his goals, even if it meant playing dirty with allies. Chapter 8. Brain-teasing questions without answers. Darkness prevails. Future uncertain. The Zelensky-Trump meeting concluded, but brain-teasing questions about Ukraine's future U.S. policy and Europe's role remained unanswered, hanging like dark clouds in the political sky. The ending of this diplomatic play was yet to be revealed, and the future remained fraught with uncertainty. 8.1. Where will Ukraine go? Destiny hanging by a thread. Would Ukraine continue to receive support from the US and the West after this turbulent meeting? The answer remained a big unknown. Trump had made no clear commitments regarding aid to Ukraine, and even hinted at the possibility of aid cuts if Kyiv did not cooperate with Washington. "I want Ukraine to do the right thing," Trump repeated at the joint press conference. "I hope they will do that. Let's see what happens." What future awaited Ukraine, a nation struggling in a protracted war, economic decline, and social division? Would Zelensky be strong and capable enough to steer the ship of Ukraine through the storm, protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and bring peace and prosperity to its people? Zelensky, with all his determination and effort, was he strong enough to shoulder this historic responsibility? Or would he become a puppet in the power play between great powers? 8.2. How far will the US go? Mysterious strategy, invisible limits. What direction would US policy towards Ukraine take after the Zelensky-Trump meeting? Would the US continue to aid Ukraine, but with bitter pill conditions? Or would it cut aid, abandon Ukraine, and leave Kyiv to fend for itself? Trump or his successor could change US policy towards Ukraine at any time, depending on the domestic and international political situation. The United States always had its own interests, and could be willing to sacrifice allies' interests if necessary. How far would the US go to confront Russia on the Ukraine issue? Would the US be willing to militarily intervene to protect Ukraine, or would it only stop at economic sanctions and military aid? Where were America's red lines on the Ukraine issue? These questions remained unanswered, and the future of US policy towards Ukraine remained a mysterious gray area. 8.3. What will Europe do? Shadowy role. Open responsibilitized Europe wake up after its disappointing silence during the Zelensky-Trump meeting. Would the EU realize that the stability and security of Ukraine were vital to Europe, and that stronger actions were needed to support Kyiv? Would the EU be strong and politically willing enough to confront Russia without US support? Could Europe secure its own security in Eastern Europe, or would it still have to rely on Washington's patronage? What would Europe's role in the Ukraine crisis be in the future? Would Europe continue to play a supporting role, or would it become a positive factor, contributing to resolving the conflict and building a peaceful and stable future for the region? These questions challenged Europe, forcing the EU to reconsider its role and responsibilities on the international stage. Europe's indifference could come at a heavy price, not only for Ukraine but also for the very future of the Union. Chapter 9. Open Ending to an Unfinished Play. Uncertain Diplomacy. Unclear future. The Zelensky-Trump meeting concluded, but the diplomatic play between Ukraine, the US, Russia, and Europe remained unfinished. The ending was still open, and the future remained fraught with uncertainty. This play showed the complexity, unpredictability, and sometimes ruthlessness of world politics. 9.1. Diplomatic Play. A Wake-Up Call. About an uncertain world. The Zelensky-Trump meeting is a wake-up call for all of us, and veteran international diplomat concluded. It shows that the world today is becoming increasingly uncertain, unpredictable, and full of risks. In the post-Cold War world, there were no longer solid alliances, no longer binding rules, and no longer common values that were absolutely respected. Nations all pursued their own interests, using every tool possible to achieve their goals, and were not afraid to betray allies if necessary. Diplomacy is no longer the art of persuasion and cooperation. The diplomat continued. It has become a ruthless power game, where nations eat each other, and no one is safe. The Zelensky-Trump diplomatic play also showed the increasing role of media and public opinion in shaping foreign policy. Leaders had to constantly perform before the public, trying to garner public support and cope with media pressures. Traditional diplomacy had given way to media diplomacy, where image and message was sometimes more important than substance and action. 9.2. Open Ending. A Fleeting Hope. A last chance thou. The future remained hazy. It did not mean Ukraine was hopeless. The open ending of the Zelensky-Trump play also offered a fleeting chance, a possibility of changing the situation. Ukraine still has a chance to save itself, an optimistic political analyst noted, but they must act quickly, decisively, and intelligently. They must build a strong alliance with Western allies, reform the country, and strengthen their military power. Zelensky, with all the difficulties and challenges ahead, still had to continue to steer the ship of Ukraine, seeking a path through the storm, and towards a future of peace, stability, and prosperity. The Zelensky-Trump diplomatic play may not have ended, but the battle for Ukraine's future was still ongoing, and the final outcome still depended on the will, courage, and wisdom of this young leader. Chapter 10. Epilogue. Lingering Echoes. Lasting Lessons. The meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky had concluded, but its echoes still resonated in public opinion, and valuable lessons lingered for politicians and diplomats. Around the world, did Zelensky come to America to win over Trump, or to win over America? The question perhaps had no unambiguous answer, and perhaps Zelensky had tried to do both, albeit with less than fully expected results. The Zelensky-Trump meeting is a prime example of the complexity and uncertainty of modern diplomacy. An international commentator summarized, "It shows that in today's world, there are no easy solutions, no eternal allies, and nothing is absolutely certain." Zelensky may have made mistakes, may have had inaccurate calculations, but it could not be denied that he had tried his best to protect Ukraine's interests in an extremely difficult and challenging situation. The important thing is to view the issue objectively, comprehensively, and draw lessons from this turbulent diplomatic play. The war in Ukraine was still ongoing, and the future of this nation remained fraught with uncertainty. But one thing was certain: the Zelensky-Trump meeting would forever remain a significant historical milestone, a sad page in international relations, and a reminder of the perils and challenges that the world faces in the 21st century. And that brings us to the end of our story-driven exploration of the Trump-Zelensky relationship. I hope you found this personal perspective insightful and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed diving into this complex political narrative with me, please hit that like button to show your support. And if you want to join our community of story enthusiasts and explore more fascinating topics through unique lenses, don't forget to subscribe to Story-Driven English and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Share this video with anyone you think would be interested in this in-depth look at international relations and these compelling figures. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of the Story-Driven English community. Until next time, keep exploring the stories that shape our world.